So,
Hello and welcome back. I'm Ken. I'm visiting with Mike. Looking forward to hearing Mike's ideas. We talked last time in the intro about a handful of successful leaders and their writings. And Mike, I'd like to know what made them successful.
well, that's the one key thing that they have in common is a process that's they're all different, and yet they're the same in terms of the stages that they had to go through, the kinds of things they had to go through. But before that, the first question to me is, why were those guys able to do what they were doing when their predecessors could have done the same thing? So what was stopping them? And what made those guys go that was different? And so then I start looking and say, okay, well, what's the mindset that they have? And there's one book that I like, or one author that I like. Her name is Carol Dweck. And she essentially studied a whole bunch of people and came to the conclusion there were two types of mindset. One of them she calls the fixed mindset, and the other one is the growth mindset. The fixed mindset says you live within the confines of what there is, and the growth mindset is the attitude is there has to be a better way. And that's probably one of the things that differentiates those people from the predecessors that they had. And then when I think of that, and I think of my own career, I remember people saying, well, don't expect to do too much. The first 2 years, you've got to kind of conform to and learn what's going on, kind of thing. In other words, you have to adapt to the situation. Uh, and I remember also the same thing with ministers taking on a new church, and people, they were being told, for the first 2 years, don't expect to do anything. Just blend in, kind of thing. And that to me would be a very characteristic of a fixed mindset. But even by categorizing things in one of those two categories, the first question would be, well, if the mindset is that important, how did they get there? What's feeding it? So then I went back to the scriptures, and there's a whole bunch of passages that I like. The first one is something to do with discernment. In other words, discernment is what? The ability, the quality of being able to grasp and comprehend what's obscure. And let's face it, when you get into an organization, there's so many things going on, it's very hard to sort things out. What's what? Where do I start? What do I tackle? Where do I go? So how do you get discernment? And then I go to Proverbs 2, for example. He talks about receive my commandments, treasure them, make your ear attentive, incline your heart, seek it as wisdom, then you will discern. So when you look at 2:1 through 2:9 in Proverbs, and then it's repeated in a number of other places in chapter 4, verses 10 to 24, essentially the same thing. And then 6:20, again, the same thing. Observes, bind them in your heart, uh, apply it all the time when you walk, when you sleep. Okay, so it has to be deep rooted. So if you have that mindset, you don't turn it on and off as you go into the situation. It has to be something that you've cultivated in your heart. In other words, it's not when a crisis comes that you start to have religion. You have to have beliefs before the crisis. And then when the crisis comes or when the situation comes, then you kind of plug back into that root, that base that you've cultivated, and that takes you through. So that's probably the one thing that I would say all of those guys have in common is they developed standards, some beliefs that were deep rooted in themselves that allowed them to confront the situation that they were placed in. So it's true of Nehemiah, it's true of the policeman out of New York City, Bratton. It's true of Ono at the Toyota system. All of those people had some firm foundation to start with. You have to have that belief. And if you're kind of wibbly wicker, then guess what? the tide will sweep you away, kind of thing. So you have to have that foundation. So then the next question is well, how do you get that? And it talks about hearing and not hearing, seeing and not seeing. And again, it goes back to says your heart has been hardened. We have the tendency to think of the heart as the pumping mechanism that we have in our body. But really, in the scriptures, it's more a matter of what are the things that are deep rooted into the beliefs that you have. And it's kind of surprising because I've asked that question to people in my consulting work. I would say to them, if you were in a different position, what is it that you hold on that says that's key? And people had a very, very, very difficult time to be able to verbalize or to say what it is that they really believe in, that they would bring into the situation. I suspect that some of those people thought that I was saying to them, go and find another job. That's not what my intention was. My intention was, are you aware of the things that you're holding deep in yourself, in your heart, to use the scriptural concept? And that's the beginning of who you are and how you behave and how you act and how those guys were able to do what they were able to do. Because when you compare all of those people, like Escalante in Los Angeles with the students from the wrong side of the track, it has nothing in common with a guy like Nehemiah that lived, 3,000 years ago, and a totally different culture, totally different environment, and yet both of them exhibited the same kind of willingness to put themselves out, to be able to confront the situation, and to bring people along to achieve it. So that's the starting point, because if you're missing that, it's very difficult for the rest to follow. So if you want change, if you want performance, yes, there are techniques, there are things that you can do, but you have to have the leadership, and a leadership that has at the core of their beliefs the kind of values that people will interpret and see that you exhibit. And depending on what you exhibit, then that will translate in terms of how they respond to it. So does that make sense?
That's wonderful. I think I hear you saying that this mindset has to be a part of the thinking of the people at the top and
Yes.
the people at the bottom and
Yes.
everyone in between in an organization.
Yes.
You've
Absolutely.
talked before about coming in and being a consultant and people spending lots of money for your services and expertise, and it doesn't have any lasting impact.
Yeah, like for instance, people will know the 5 S's, one technique for lean manufacturing or lean organizations. So they know that, but the rest doesn't follow. So if you don't have the leadership, that exhibits, and because if the leadership exhibits that, then they have to have a certain behavior that will then convey the importance of what they're trying to achieve. I remember the days when I joined a major airplane company in Seattle, not to mention anybody, and there were the big laws. The quality is number one, you know. Well, you're going to have the logos and the slangs and everything else, but if the behavior doesn't line up with that, guess what? People say this is just propaganda, I guess you could say, you know. So somebody feels good because they said that they're for that, but the question is they don't live it. And to live it, you have to have it in your heart. And like you said, it starts with the top. Because when I think back of assignments where I didn't get the kind of results that I did at other places, what was the major difference? Well, maybe I'm rationalizing, but one of the key things that was missing is this, the leadership was kind of a hands-off kind of thing. And unless they exhibited the same philosophy, then people don't touch it. You know, I remember one sales VP saying to me, you know, go ahead, do your thing, and I'll watch. And I said, no way, Jose, you know, it's not going to work. You're either part of it and we do it together, because at the end of the day, it's not the consultant that has to make things happen. It's the people in the location. And if you wanted to continue, if you want sustainability, if the consultant goes away, hopefully that continues after they leave. Otherwise, guess what? There's just a flash in the pan. You may or may not have some results. And let's face it, most consultants are a waste of time and money, you know, because they're expected to do their thing, and, you know, it doesn't change your culture. So the heart is at the start, and the leadership is key to making things happen.
Wonderful. What a key concept. Are there other common threads you want to address right now?
Once you have that kind of thing, then you've got to have to look at what are the things that you believe in, and you know, and it's more than just a religious thing. Like, for instance, in the case of Moses, you had the Ten Commandments and things of that sort that God instituted in Exodus. But in business, if you're in marketing, there are core principles. In manufacturing, there are core principles. In personnel management, there are core principles. And in some ways, you see with the political situation in the United States right now, the culture clash that there is as to which principles are you going to have that will run the way we do things. You know, on one hand, people say you ought to be promoted or selected on qualification and merits and performance. And on the other hand, some other people say, no. Equity is, let's make everybody the same. So if you don't have enough of those or this or whatever, then you have to add those people to the mix, because otherwise it's not fair. So you have two basic core values that essentially clash literally in the environment. You see that in Minnesota right now, you know. How do you make that happen? You know? So the core values are important, and the leadership is key, because it sets the tone for the rest of, in this case, the country, but in a department or in a company or in a division or in a church, those values are critical.
Excellent. So if I could sum up, the first question is, what's your mindset? Do you have a fixed mindset, nothing's going to change, or a growth mindset where there's a better way and let's find it together?
Yep.
That mindset turns into what's in your heart. What do you really believe in?
Yes.
and the mindset and the growth mindset needs to be a part of the heart of the leaders and the ones at the bottom and everybody in between.
In between.
And you went further to talk about the values, or there are two conflicting philosophies. I tried hard not to laugh out loud, because it's easy to see in a lot of organizations there are completely opposite ways of choosing. Is there anything you want to add before we conclude today?
No, I think that's a starting point, because once you've got that, then you can start looking at what's the process that those leaders exhibited. And that's where I get excited, because I can look at those 5, 6, 10 different cases, schools. Why are public schools failing? And I forget the term now for the schools that are somewhat independent of the school system.
Charter?
Succeed. I'm sorry?
Charter
schools, yeah, succeed. It's a different set of values.
Yeah.
And you see that in play, and you see the results.
Yes.
And the key thing, it goes back to the heart, because what happens in the public school, they deny it. It doesn't happen. It's not. So if the heart is hardened, if your attitude is such that you will see, but you won't see.
Yeah. So next visit, I'd like to tackle process and get your thoughts about that. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm excited with you about what's going on here. Thank you.